Thank you very much. And thank you, Sachs Associates, for organising this and inviting us and a great panel. So my name briefly is Shelley Margetson. I'm from BioVentures. BioVentures is a venture capital fund in Belgium, and we invest in early stage companies in therapeutics and sustainable agriculture. My background, finance business, worked in biotech for a long time, have been with VBio for 4 years now. So we have a fantastic panel. We'll take you through the panel introductions first, then loop back to Marie, our second chair. So Edward, if I can hand over to you and then walk down the line to the right. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. Thank you for being here. My name is Edward van Wezel. I'm a managing partner at BioGeneration Ventures. We are an early stage fund based in the Netherlands. We focus on therapeutics only and are agnostic to therapeutic areas or modalities. We've been active since 2006, currently about 25 companies in our portfolio, of which about 12 have been create companies, as we call them, so companies that we have started from scratch. And we continue to do so currently out of our fifth fund, which is a 150 million fund. And we're only a little bit more than a year into the fund, so we can still do some new exciting investments from that nice little bag of money. Laurent.
So I run Laurent Jacqueroud, Business Development and Investment Director at Cumulus Oncology. Cumulus Oncology is a venture builder. We operate a hub and spoke strategy. We source innovative assets from universities, biotechs, but also pharma companies. The idea is then to de-risk those assets within Cumulus, maturate them, and once we hit the right scientific and market milestones, then we incorporate those assets into their own newco. So it's a pleasure.
Michael Altorfer, the CEO of the Swiss Biotech Association. As such, not an investor, rather an observer. I can hopefully contribute to this panel by giving a bit of an assessment what we observe with a focus on the startups and SMEs in Switzerland. We're talking roughly 1,500 companies, about 60,000 jobs. And while we do not directly invest, we provide support for connecting these companies with global investors, global pharma partners for our venture platform, and also through reporting about their activities and connecting them internationally at the Swiss Biotech Day. So with that, I hand over to one of our collaborators and partners that are right to me.
Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Hübner. I'm the country lead here in Switzerland for early innovation partnering at Johnson & Johnson Innovation. As part of that role, I also sit on the Johnson & Johnson Switzerland leadership team representing our 5,700 employees here in the country. In brief, Johnson & Johnson Innovation is a global network dedicated to early stage innovation. We've been existing for about 10 years now, and in brief, the three activities that we coordinate out of our innovation centers are early stage collaborations, partnerships. The second activity is our venture capital fund, JJDC, and the third activity that I might be able to tell you a little bit more about later is our JLabs incubators. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephan. I'm from BaseLaunch, which is a Basel-based incubator. And what we try to do is finance and build companies to the stage where they are basically ready for prime time, which for us means they're able to raise venture financing after us. And we operate in close collaboration with several pharma companies in the venture fund, one of them being Johnson & Johnson. Then we have AbbVie, Novo, Nordisk, Pureos, CSL Behring, Roche as well, and a Korean company. And they provide two things. They, if you want to call it a fund, provide the fund out of which you invest. And at the same time, they're on our board. So we basically decide together with them what we should invest. So that gives us direct line of sight into what we believe are interesting companies to finance, but the more importantly, what's the de-risking path that someone like Johnson & Johnson would directly engage. And that has been proven to be quite successful. We've done 25 companies, half of them roughly went on to raise significant financing, over $500 million by now, and the rest is still ongoing.
Thank you so much to the panel. And just to round off introductions, my name is Marie Schroeder. I'm part of the Novo Holdings Seed Investments team. Novo Holdings is a venture capital fund that invests on behalf of the Novo Nordisk Foundation. We invest across the spectrum of life sciences, from us in the seeds team all the way up through growth and private public equity. We also have a bioindustrials team and an Asia team. In the seed investments team, we focus on company creation and investment up through about Series A, though we reserve capital to invest throughout the span of a company. We're focused on therapeutics and also disease area agnostic. Personally, I've worked in academic and pharmaceutical science for a number of years, primarily in the cardiovascular and cardiometabolic areas. So great to be here. And to kick off the discussion, so Edward, we understand that you've picked a number of winners in your career. So can you comment on maybe a couple of cases that stand out to you, and specifically mention what made these company winners for you to bet on, and ultimately, to be successful throughout the company?
Okay, let's start with the most difficult question immediately. That's good.
Exactly. 46 minutes now. Go.
Yeah, I mean, it's of course always a multifactorial situation when you select a company to invest in, and there are many reasons why you do, and also a lot of reasons why you don't invest. So, if I look back at our major successes, I think sometimes we really have to confess the stars were aligned. Everything worked out according to plan, and that in biotech is more exceptional actually than the rule. So when we select companies, we go through quite a rigorous process, of course, and sometimes you run into assets that will work in the clinic, and that our biggest success to date is a company called Altorfer Pharma that we sold to AstraZeneca in 2016. So this is history of a long time ago, but still the biggest venture-backed deal that was done in Europe with a big pharma company that paid 7 billion for this company when we just entered phase 3 with a BTK inhibitor in CLL in leukemia. So. And what made that work was that we just had a very good asset, and we had an extremely good team to make it work. Here in Basel, currently we have 2 companies that we have selected and where we're working from. And I think the challenge for investors, if you look at what makes or breaks a company, obviously is the content, but also the team that you work with. And one of those companies that we have here in Basel called Azafaros, made it to the Swiss Biotech overview, I understand today. It's actually a company that was founded in the Netherlands, but we only found the talent that we needed here because of the relevance, in particular for companies like Actelion, for example, where people had worked in the same specific therapeutic area for a long time already. So sometimes it's a little bit coincidental, but we look for those kind of qualities, those kind of experiences to help make the company successful. Currently, this company is in phase 2, so we're not there yet, or we just finalized the phase 2 clinical study. We're not there yet. The data look great, so we're very happy with that. But those factors are usually very important to us. I'll stop here, but I can go on if you want.
No, that's very helpful. And Michael Hübner, I understand at J&J you're doing a lot. You're involved in a number of initiatives to actually help build up the people that will become the teams that Edward just mentioned. Can you comment on some of the opportunities and challenges you see there in actually training people to innovate and become entrepreneurs?
Sure. So the topic here is picking the winners, and give me just 10 seconds to recognize that we do. I think we did a good job this year already in Europe, and in particular in Switzerland, of picking the winners. So we're often seen as the large J&J mothership coming out of the US, but I think it's important to recognize that this year J&J has been the biggest pharma investor here in Switzerland alone. Which consists of a major acquisition that we did for $1.25 billion for the company Yellow Jersey, plus 190 million in venture capital funding that we led or contributed in. But picking the winners is only one side of the coin. The other side is that I think we're doing a good job at developing the companies that will be the winners of the next generation. And what I mean here is that on the one hand, we're a large pharma company, but a fact that is perhaps not so well known here in the audience is that we also incubate startup companies. And we actually 10 years ago started a global network of incubators. We now have 11 sites globally, where so far we have incubated over 1,000 startup companies, biotech companies. This is a no strings attached model, by the way. So I think this is very beneficial to the startups and to the biotech companies, which means that if you enter JLabs, you don't need to sign up to J&J. You don't need to give us any equity. You don't need to show us confidential information. We incubate you. We work together with you. We provide mentorship. We give you somebody on your side that helps you through all the questions that a small biotech might not be able to answer. So in other words, you get large pharma benefits for a small biotech company. And again, this is no strings attached. So that worked pretty well for us over the past 10 years. As I said, over 1,000 companies have graduated or are in JLabs. You can choose to be a resident in JLabs. And we have, as I mentioned, a couple of sites across the globe. But you can also choose to be a virtual member. So you don't need to relocate your staff. You don't need to relocate your offices and labs. You can still benefit from the program without having to relocate. And as I mentioned, there is all kinds of benefits from mentorship, looking at your program from a pharma perspective. There is a lot of visibility for investors. Being a JLabs company is a flag of approval because you've gone through a rigorous selection process. So there is lots of interest and visibility from investors. And we put you on panels, we put you on programs, so there is lots of visibility as well, plus better rates with suppliers and so on. So there is definitely a lot of benefits for companies. So I think that's our way of promoting the next generation of startups and generating the next generation of winners.
Thank you so much. Stephan, I feel like you have some related experiences to share from your work at BaseLaunch. Could you perhaps comment on, first of all, what for these very, very early companies, what motivates you to allow them into BaseLaunch, and then what do you actually do to set them up for prime time, as you so eloquently said?
Yeah. So I think there's now, if you look at the companies we've done, there's kind of two types of companies with basic investing. I think when they come in, some are just so obvious you have to do it. And there's one in the room right now that was such an obvious case in a novel approach to the TNF pathway. It was a little bit early when we actually got engaged the first time. So they came back with a bit more data. We invested into them. And then within a year, they raised a very nice round. It's not out there, but I guess many of you touched with them. So it was so obvious. And there's other cases where it's much less obvious, and you start to build trust over, you look at them, you have a process, you go to the diligence, you talk to people, then we talk to our partners. So it's kind of a trust building exercise, and you get more and more accustomed with them until you kind of unpack what they really have. I think the difficulty is there's a wide variation in between. So you need to be careful not to, some are very obvious not to do. That's easy, right? Some you might think at first are very obvious to do, but then you shouldn't. And then you need to just be sure that you kind of take your decisions such that you're not trapped into it. So I think for us, the way we set up with J&J and the others helping us vet in on the decision helps a lot, because basically giving direct market feedback of if this works, and then we would be interested in that one. So I think that's giving us a lot of conviction. And what's the second part of it?
I can't exactly remember. So I think it was when you select a company, how do you take them to the next level?
Okay. It's basically just building out the comps from the beginning on licensed IP and building up the team, a good place, as Michael also mentioned, to add experienced people in. And it's basically generating more data to see if what they want to do actually works. I think that's standardized approach.
Thank you very much. And Michael, you mentioned yourself, you're not an investor, but you see yourself as an observer. So can you share some of your observations over the kind of trends that have been going on at the moment?
Sure, there are of course many trends at various levels. Now, in connection with the topics you have spoken about, getting the companies ready, getting the companies professional from the start. It's particularly important in Switzerland as we have little to no support by the government. We really have the quest to set up companies to be professional, to be ready to compete internationally from the setup. And that's where, of course, support from JLab, support from BaseLaunch, support from organizations like Venture Lab, Venture Leader programs are very helpful. I think in general, we see this trend that over the last years, there is an ever bigger push and expectation of the investors not to have the patience to look at spin-offs of universities and see smart scientists forming their own company and somehow setting up shop. It's even more obvious for those that are building the companies themselves, right? If you're a venture builder, either way, however you start, wherever you come from, the quest is to be a professional, set up as soon as ever possible, and where there is some knowledge lacking, on one hand, get trained, get support, listen. On the other hand, make sure that you build your advisory board, you build your board, and you have even experienced team members to make sure that you're ready for prime time.
Thank you very much. And Laurent, coming to you, you look at things much more from the scientific point of view. Science is essential for you, building asset data packages, reviewing things. Could you obviously that is key for any of the winners. Science is at the base of all the winners. So could you give us an insight in how you approach that and where you see challenges or successes?
Yes, I mean, obviously the data drives the decision making, I think for all of us. The challenge that we face is to find well-packaged science. It's not always easy, and I think this comes to just multifactorial. Some TTOs do this a bit better than others, and finding the right science that could be spun out in a company. Not every interesting science from a scientific perspective can make it into a company or an asset. So this is something that needs to be taught, or there's a bit of education to be done for PIs as well, to understand that the scientific question that they're currently raising is really interesting from a scientific perspective, but the assay that needs to be done for a decision tree in terms of progressing your assay is completely different. And I think in France, I don't know how it is in other countries, but in France, certainly when I was a pharmacist and a PhD student, you were always pushed towards publication. So there's nothing that emphasizes the entrepreneurship, in those early stages, or in those academic labs, or in some really prestigious universities or hospitals. They have a bit more training to that. And also, IP seems to be kind of a bad word a bit in that ecosystem. So, what do you do with IP? What do you do with it? How do you come to create it? So again, there's a lack of knowledge that translates into a low number of interesting science assets, so to speak. And I think I'm also a big believer in giving feedback to those early stage assets, whether they spun out from universities or whatever, because then you create your own winner. Because it might be too early for you because they're missing this or that type of data point. But if you guide them and say, okay, come back when you have done this or when you've thought about this, then you give them guidance, help them with succeeding. But then when you see them back in 6 months to a year or something like this, then they basically fit your bill. And then it's much easier to embark with them into an entrepreneurial approach.
Thank you, Laurent. And one thing I would like to delve in a little bit deeper, and I'm going to throw it into the whole group, so whoever wants to answer this, feel free to kind of put on your microphone first. But that is, we've mentioned science, we've mentioned location, we've mentioned teams, and you kind of combined them a bit, Laurent, where you said that publication was very important and much less so entrepreneurship. And I think we discussed it in the preparatory call that we had, where we felt that there was a difference between Europe and America there, and that we could do some copying, some kind of learning from the US on entrepreneurship, on building teams, on getting them away from that academic kind of approach. So I see one microphone on already, so go for it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and it's really important because look, most startups are spun out of university with somebody's project that they had, and they get fostered by multiple ways, by grants and InnoSwiss and so on. But many of the entrepreneurs that we see still have that university thinking, still have that country thinking, still are in their bubble. But once you're a biotech CEO and you're seriously looking for partnerships with either pharma or venture capital, then you're getting into an area where it's global. Our thinking from a pharma perspective, and venture capital as well, in many cases, is global thinking. So we'll pitch you against opportunities from elsewhere, from all over the world. And that's where I think, unfortunately, many Swiss, European startups are falling behind a bit. I think no doubt the innovation is there. There are great academic centers, great universities, great minds coming up with great ideas. So I think that's not the problem. I think the problem starts when you have to compete globally with startups from the US, Asia, elsewhere. In Europe, England, I think, is quite leading in terms of how startups present themselves. And I think that's where Swiss or European startups, it's not a Swiss problem, it's more a European problem, I think, where they fall behind even though the science is there. And it's some of that business savviness that is lacking. It's some of that academic thinking that's still embedded in people's minds. So it's a pity that some of these fall behind. And just a 1 minute pitch how we try and help people. Last year, we as J&J Innovation teamed up with BaseLaunch and with a Swiss healthcare licensing group to address that problem. How do we get entrepreneurs, first-time entrepreneurs with great scientific ideas, how do we get them to the next stage? How do we make them more competitive? So we put together a program last year. We're in the second year now, where annually we pick 30 startup companies that have great ideas but unexperienced entrepreneurs, and we get them through a 1-year program. It's all for free. We do it for free. We educate the entrepreneurs in 4 half-day workshops on Business Development 101. How do you pitch? And you really pitch in front of J&J, Novartis, Roche, Venture Capital, and you really get a tangible feedback. We tell them about term sheets with TTOs and negotiations and asset and company valuation. So it's really some of the basics that perhaps a serial entrepreneur out of Boston would know already because they've gone through it a couple of times, but maybe local entrepreneurs don't do it. So again, little pitch for this program. Applications start in spring again. It's all for free. So a great way to get exposed to pharma and venture capital.
I maybe have something on from the other side, and I don't know if it's maybe my colleagues can comment. Well, the one thing we always see is, and I think that you do in the US much more thinking from the end, and with that I mean, like the biggest problem for us is always that people don't really think about the competition that way. I mean, they usually look at what's out there, but they always forget to really go deep in how this would compete when whatever solution they're offering is on the market, and then they always often forget what's under development currently. So I think that is a big difference to many, or let's say probably to the US, because it comes with experience, right? And you really need to think through hard what you're developing. If it's obviously scientifically nice, but not more, is there a market for this? And with that, it's not just how big the market, not the standard market assessments, really, like, is there someone gonna sell this drug compared to another one which might have a similar profile? So we see a lot of that people really forget to benchmark themselves. And I think that I mean, we are always very adamant on that. We wouldn't go on if that hasn't been thought through well enough.
And I think that point is really important. The market, but also the scalability of the technology is something that a lot of those early, first-time CEOs are forgetting about, because it's not because it works in the lab at the bench that you'll be able to scale it to 10,000 liters bioreactors or whatever. So this is also something that needs to be thought, and again, there's some education to be made on that level as well.
Can I be a bit controversial? So what we always and still encounter when we do investments, for example, here in Switzerland, actually here in Basel, is that there is this enormous fear that once we invest, at some point somebody in the US will take over, pick up the company, book a transatlantic flight, and they're gone, and no employment will remain here. I think that preconception is extremely strong, and we in Europe essentially are handicapped by that, because I see that all over, and it's seen as a bad thing. I think we should learn also the way people in the US work, is that what counts is the success of the company. That should go first, and whether we find the AAA team of people that actually do the work anywhere in the world ultimately shouldn't matter. So we quite recently did an investment here, a spin out of the IOB, which of course is funded by not only a big pharmaceutical company, but also with some local government money and university money, as far as I understand at least. And that was one of the key concerns that they have. And I understand all that, but we should not be afraid that at a certain point, a very specialized technology, in this case in ophthalmology, may require that we find people that have actually done this before, because the financial community is usually not really willing to pay for the learning curve of all these people that are, I think, ultimately intrinsically very well suited to do this, but have never done it before. And it's, as an investor, much more easier to find people, okay, you know what to do, you know where to go to get this drug into the clinic, into the patient as soon as possible, preferably without delay. So it's that discussion. And my experience is actually, when we are successful, there will be payback one way or the other. The company that I just referred to in the Netherlands that we sold to AstraZeneca was a Dutch company. Where we sold it, we only had 10 people in the Netherlands and more than 200 in the US. Now we have 150 people in the Netherlands that still work for AZ at the same location. So the employment ultimately came back. There is some payback at some point. It's not that it always disappeared. It is a given. So we should be a bit more open to the fact that ultimately the opportunity in Europe is great. There's great science. There's great opportunity also for investors to invest. And I think for us as early stage investor, that provides a really interesting chance to find really cool science and that drives innovation. But the let's say the handicap that we have is sometimes these local policies and local fears that will end up somewhere in the hands of a big pharma company in the US and we'll never see it again. I don't think that is a bad thing. Let's make sure that we transfer or transform these inventions that are done here at great universities by great people into drugs that actually help patients. That's what's count, I would say. And I think then the success will come by itself, because the people that found these companies will still have a link locally. We'll have people here that will develop new companies once they've been successful once, and then it's much more easier to fund those companies and with these serial entrepreneurs that have been involved in these companies from the get-go. So there's a lot to say for being a little bit more open to that and trying to take that opportunity once you, for example, see a bunch of American investors aggressively taking a company back to the US. Don't be afraid for that. That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing.
At Novo, for sure, we make sure to highlight how many investment dollars we brought into Denmark, like beyond, from international sources, not just the Danish funding. So it's, a really good point. And another question for the entire panel. Many of you have alluded to the importance in securing partnerships for early stage biotech companies. And can you just walk us through how companies should find the right partner, the right partnership at the right time, and what to be wary of?
I think there's also maybe something about accelerating the development of the program and de-risking it. I worked for Corma Partners before being at Cumulus Oncology, and here the idea was really to create companies kind of a triangle shape. So the asset originator, Corma brings smart capital, not just capital, the smart capital, and then always an entity that had either a good understanding of the indication or of the technology. And so there have been companies created such as Dynacure, where we brought Ionis, which is the leader in the oligo space. The scientists developed an oligo approach, and again, it could have fallen into so many pitfalls developing it. But by having that partner who knew what an oligo is and how to develop it, we accelerated tremendously the company, and again avoided a few missteps along the line.
Maybe from our perspective, all these things are of course connected. Training the people, making them ready for prime time, making sure they do avoid mistakes that have been made too many times already. But then at the same time, being global from the get-go and thinking global, it means that you aspire to work with the best. Now, how can you work with the best? First thing is you need to be known and you need to be connected. So one thing we can help with our online platforms, so that no matter where the partners sit, they can see that the Swiss biotech companies exist, what they do, what they look for. But the other way is also to be actively followed, that you understand the competition, you understand who could accelerate your development, who are the knowledgeable people that in your field are critical to work with. So the one thing that is clear, if you don't know the company, you will not work with them. If the company doesn't understand what it wants to follow and with whom they want to work, it will also fail. So this is what we try to support as an association through the Swiss Biotech Day, through our online platforms, by inviting all potential partners and really building the global network. And I'm absolutely with you, Edward. No matter where the people sit, it's super arrogant if anybody thinks that the smartest people are always in a certain location or a certain field.
Perhaps I can add to that a bit from the large pharma perspective. So obviously, I think the two things that are really critical, and everybody would say that, is the science and the team, right? But let's dig a bit deeper into that. What are we looking for in the science and in the team? I think there are many factors that play into the success of a partnership when we're looking at startups and at slide decks and so on. But when it comes to the science, I think first of all, the most important thing is to get the basics right. We sometimes see companies that are trying with a small budget to get as far as possible, to get close to the clinic, or to get even into the clinic on small budgets. But look, my advice would be get the basics right, get the basic experiments right, have a good look from a pharma perspective at your molecule. Is it ready? Is it good enough from a medchem perspective? Is the molecule really, does it have the right TPP? Does it have the right properties? And get the basics right in terms of evaluating, are you on the right track with your target? Is the science solid? Is the pathway relevant? Is there a significant basic data package to support your hypothesis? And when that is a given, that's when pharma would come in and be able to help, fund a research collaboration to get to the next data package and so on. But if we see data packages of companies that have been trying to go too far, too fast, with too little money, then often we get to a point where we say, look, we got to go back 2 years to the drawing board of your chemistry because you made a mistake 2 years ago. And that's often prohibitive. And that's where often we say, look, this doesn't make sense for us from a pharma perspective. So that's I think one of the key things that I want to highlight in terms of the science. Obviously, there are many other factors in the science, but let me get to the second point, and that's the team. Obviously, we mentioned that you need to be business savvy. You need to understand your competition. You need to understand how to position your product and have an idea of where this could be placed in pharma and which pharma could be interested here. But I think in terms of the team, it's really important to have that open conversation and have that open conversation early on. Try and understand that my job is to help you. My interest is to do a deal with you. Pharma is not your enemy. You don't need to try and hide data away from us or be scared of losing ideas or pharma is taking something away. I think that openness, you find that in many CEOs or biotech representatives. But also you find that resistance sometimes where people don't want to reveal, they don't want to talk, and they are scared. So that openness and that collaboration between you and me or us, that's I think also really important to have that open scientific conversation from scientist to scientist.
Maybe I have just specifically on partnerships, right? It really depends on what the company does. But the biggest issue we see is that you need to be sure that partnerships leave the company room to breathe on themselves, on their own too, because you need to have something. Just talking about fundraising, you need to have something that you own, right? That you want to bring to the clinic and are able to raise venture capital financing. So if you partner out everything at the beginning, and it's another model, right? But that is very challenging. So I think early partnerships you really need to think through when, how, and how to structure them. And then I think they can work well. And obviously it depends, if it's a technology platform, that's great. If it's a single asset on novel biology, then you have to be really careful how you would structure something.
But I think there are two levels of partnerships, basically. So I think we always refer to the partnership within a biotech and a pharma company, but there's also the partnerships with enabling technologies, right? And so I would use the example that we are thriving with the Cumulus is we've incorporated a new company called Geotherapeutics, GIO, and we focus on a subgroup of GPCRs, so proton sensing GPCRs, and more specifically GPR68. And here we announced a couple of weeks ago a world's first where a collaboration with Lead Xpro, which is a Swiss-based company using microscopy to decipher the structures of proteins. And so we have now the exclusive rights to that structure. And interestingly enough, several pharma companies tried to tackle that specific target and failed. So all the programs were discontinued. And just because if you tackle GPCRs, you need to be ultra selective, otherwise you'll go into off-target effect and toxicity. And so now with that particular partnership, having that structure available, well, we are in the unique position to develop a rationally designed inhibitor. So again, enabling technology that will give us kind of the solution to a problem, to a problematic target. So it's basically flipping a losing target into a winning target through that enabling technology, partnering with a company that has this enabling technology.
Can I put one more thing to the table? So what we always try to also as a fund is to help the companies that get in front of us and try to make sure that they are in contact with the right people. For example, just as an example is the CMC side of things, so the manufacturing side. So we have a long-standing collaboration with Lonza, for example, where we have easy access points to the organization to make sure that the companies that we work with get quick feedback. They can actually do some initial work against certain attractive conditions, and that is extremely helpful for companies in those early phases to first of all get a very clear idea on what the budget should look like ultimately when they want to enter the clinic, but also get feedback from an organization, in this case, just as an example, that has such a long time already experience in manufacturing, so that they don't make these obvious mistakes anymore. They don't spend a lot of time on things that are not so useful, and just to say, and of course are extremely costly. So it's those kind of examples, not only with CDMOs but also with CROs, that we try to make sure that that our companies know from a very early phase already what their partners could be and what they could offer, but also listen to their advice. Same goes for pharma, of course. I think every VC does that. They talk to pharma companies all the time. Like we do, we try to absorb their feedback on certain technologies, certain therapeutic areas, and understand what they would like to see before they would even consider to partner with those companies. So it's a broad ecosystem, and there, as VCs, we play a little role also to help these companies early on.
Thanks very much, and that's a really interesting point, and I'd like to take that and kind of change the discussion a little bit, because that's after you've selected your portfolio companies, Edward. So that, and a lot of you have said we help companies and we do. No, oh, okay. Oh, well, interesting, because that's going to be my question. Because my question is, once you have selected the companies and you help them, you're trying to make them winners, but you selected them. So for the companies in the audience today, they only have slots of 20 minutes. What can they do to kind of get your attention, to kind of want to look more? What's kind of the key messages that they should bring to the table? Can you give some advice to the companies on that? Yeah, well, to you and others, J&J maybe.
I think, Shelley, there's a lot but I think ultimately, I'm going to be repetitive in this. I mean, in the 20 minutes, it's really trying to convince us on the science. I mean, that's the real thing that is important, and of course the opportunity, where they are, and preferably sound realistic in their plans and ideas on how to develop whatever product they aspire to develop. So those are the key messages, and I'm old and gray by now, so I can say that. So within 10 to 15 minutes, you usually know whether it's even worthwhile to take a step forward. So you can listen quite easily, and it's not difficult for us to assess if people know what they're doing. But the science comes first. So we get excited by the science and the proposition that is in front of us, then will help the companies to develop and hopefully make them into a successful company.
So if I may look, you're representing one company with one or two programs, and you've been doing this for quite a while. You know everything about your program. When I come to this conference or BioEurope or anything else, I hear so many pitches, everything from heme oncology to solid oncology to neuroscience, neurodegenerative, immunology, all platforms, all pathways, all targets, all technologies. It is not easy if you have to do that, if you hear pitch after pitch in such diverse areas. What I'm missing often is that you tell me, look, I know the J&J strategy. I've heard your CEO talk about it in the quarterly earnings call. I've checked your website. I know what your gaps are. I know which drugs you have on the market. I know which come off patent soon. I know what your problem is. And here is our solution to your problem. And that helps me understand what you're doing. Which of my problems are you trying to solve? That makes me understand better how I can represent it to my superiors and to our scientists, because I can say, look, there is a company that knows exactly what we're doing, and they have a product to fix our problem. And they've talked to our scientists and they understand what they're doing. So that I think for me is something that on really very rare cases I've seen that conversation where you make me understand what problem you're solving. Often it's just a pitch, we've been developing this and this and this and that. And then I need to make up my mind. How could I explain that to our scientists? Where would that fit in and so on? So that would be my top advice. Do your homework. Check your target. So your pharma or venture capital, check your targets, what they're interested in, what their strategy is. It's often on the website. It's often in investor calls and so on. So position yourself, target your pitch, and do your homework and tailor your presentation to the person you're talking to.
maybe next to the fact that you are more successful if you do that and precisely present why you are talking to this person, it's also worthwhile to spend time to avoid speaking to the wrong people. Because if you cannot make that pitch, if it's obvious that actually you have a different strategy than what we can offer, then it's a waste of time, not just for the biotech companies, but equally for all the partners, the investors and pharma companies. Our venture platform, for that matter, matches stage and development modality and indication to facilitate that assessment and hopefully guide people. So I always say, please respect it. If the partner is signaling that they are not interested in oncology, don't waste their time presenting your oncology project. It's simple, but you are surprised how many hours, days and weeks we are wasting in our industry, not respecting that.
So we only have about 7 minutes left in the panel, so time kind of flew. But maybe as a closing question, I'd like to pose a question I should have asked in the beginning, which is, what does being a winner actually look like these days? So clearly the fundraising environment has evolved over the last few years, and being a winner can take many different shapes and forms. And I don't necessarily mean, obviously, $1 billion acquisition is what we all want, but what are some more medium-term value inflection points that you all would categorize, would say a company is, does qualify as a winner?
All right, I'll go first. It's tough, right? And it's tougher today to pick the winners than it was maybe 10 or 20 years ago, I guess. You had your small molecules and your large molecules, and today the number of different platforms, everything from ADCs to radioligands to cell therapies, autologous and allogeneic and gene therapy and small molecules and degraders and all of that. It is getting very complex these days. There are so many different platforms for just one target. And as a pharma, and probably also for venture capital, it's very difficult to see which is going to be the winner, which is going to be the winning technology for that one target or for that one pathway or that one indication. So it's tough, and that's why I think in the past couple of years we've seen that pharma is looking for more de-risking. We just need a bit more reason to believe in this technology, in the target. We need to see a bit more data. So I think that's the trend that, at least what I've seen in the industry over the past couple of years. I know that doesn't help much, but I think it's a trend we can't avoid with that plethora of technologies that have come up in the past couple of years.
Well, I think for us it's quite easy that they can basically raise substantial financing that then they can further develop, like short term. That's what we try to do. And I guess long term, I mean, several comes out in the clinic now. We'll hope that it go all the way through and it works, right?
So I think for us it's like, when we start, we have a certain hypothesis and investment rationale, right, that we could nicely write down in our investment memos to our investment committees. It all sounds very bureaucratic, but that's how it works. And then ultimately, if that hypothesis really works out, even if it's very early, right, even if we've only done some in vitro and in vivo perhaps experiments, if that works out, then of course we're on a good path, and then we can also invest more. We can be enthusiastic about the particular opportunity, and that is of course the very first signal that indeed this hypothesis, the science behind it, is working out in relevant models, for example. That those are the kind of signals that we get, and not a winner yet, obviously, in the sense that we are able to return a nice amount of money to our LPs, but still, for us, in selecting that opportunity, a really nice underlining of the fact that we may have made the right decision to go forward. And then we'll see how things will pan out. There's many, many things that can still go wrong, as you know.
Maybe just a complementary comment to, you mentioned science is important, and absolutely the science is a key element of any successful development. But what we observe is that maybe sometimes science is not good enough. We need ultimately a product that can help solve a medical need. And it also needs to be available, accessible, and affordable. Otherwise, we have seen now a couple of examples where we even have approval of products, gene therapies, that are just not making it to the market. They are just not generating revenues. So when we work together between investors, biotechs, and pharma companies, I think this is an essential part that we should always carefully bear in mind. We need ultimately a product that is helping solve a medical need and is becoming part of a toolbox for the global healthcare system. Otherwise, it's a scientific breakthrough, can be very important, but it's not a product.
I think on that topic, getting feedback from key opinion leaders, clinicians is also really helpful, because you understand for them if they would use that tool in their therapeutic arsenal. You have to tame their expectations sometimes, because they always see a new tool for them to use. So obviously they would say, oh yeah, it's fantastic, we'll use it, we'll try it. So you have to be aware of this, but I think for us it's also a good kind of a element to de-risk as well. So we talk to VCs, we talk to pharma, but also talking to key opinion leaders to understand, or clinicians, to understand if they would use this and where to place this in the therapeutic decision tree is also something really important, because if you are in the 5th therapeutic line, then obviously your market might be a bit small or smaller than if you are in the 2nd or first line. So you need to understand this as well, to place yourself also when you pitch to pharma and say, okay, there's cash to be made, because it would be put in those early lines of treatment, and not in a vault somewhere, only if you have the resistance of the resistance of the resistance.
Thanks very much. We're down to the last 90 seconds, so thank you very much for a wonderful discussion. I would just like to ask the audience if there's any questions from you that you would like to ask any of these panel people sitting here. Panelists, sorry.
Please raise your hand. We have very few moments.
And if not, I would like to thank all these wonderful panelists. I like to call them people because I didn't want to highlight they were all male, but we'll leave it at that. So thank you very much. And also thank you, Marie, for being a wonderful co-chair. And thank the audience.